moves the knight again. I don't know if I would have done that. I would have probably tried to get this guy out with g6 and bishop g7. It's true, you are gaining a tempo, but I think you're going to have to spend a move. Yes, after queen d3, you now have to defend that knight. And now I think black is giving up some of the tempo or the tempi that he's gained because white can play f4. Excellent move. Excellent move. So you always got to be careful moving the f pawn. It makes you susceptible, especially on this diagonal and perhaps that diagonal, because the f2 square, and for black it's the f7 square, that's the only square in the starting position that's only defended by the king, and only the king. So it's a tender square. So as I was saying earlier about black gaining a tempo, white is now gaining a tempo by developing the pawn and hitting the queen. So black has to spend another move moving the queen. Okay, so queen there. And now white gets another tempo. Excellent move. Okay, queen c5. And now bishop to e3. So now this is where things get a little tricky. So it looks like, and this is what makes chess hard. Ordinarily, that's a great move because not only are you developing a piece, but you're attacking the knight twice. And so it looks like you're going to win that knight because the only other way for black to protect the knight a second time would be a move like rook a4. And of course, you just lose the knight, or lose the rook in that instance. Unfortunately, in this case, black has a trick. And black sees this trick. So I'm going to take a drink break, take a sip of my beer. Let's see. I'll give you a few seconds to see if you can spot the move that black played here. Okay, did you find it? So the important thing to note is that the bishop is only defended once by the queen. So if we could somehow draw the queen away from the bishop, bishop wouldn't be protected. And so therefore, we might be able to capture the bishop. And this is what's known as, I like to use an acronym LPDO, which stands for loose pieces drop off. I had read that in a John Nunn book, Secrets of Grandmaster Chess or something. Secrets of Grandmaster, or Grandmaster Secrets. Anyway, I think it was written like in the 2000s. And that's for the first time that I'd ever seen that reference. And I've always liked it because it's a good way to remember that, hey, if you've got some loose pieces on the board, you want to really examine them and make sure you're not dropping them. So in this case, black found a really nice move. Knight takes c2. So because it's check, we can't play bishop takes queen. That would be a darn shame. Because we're in check, laws of chess don't allow us to leave our king in check. So not only is it check, but the knight is forking the king and rook. So we're almost obligated to take that knight. In the game, well, I suppose don't think it would have mattered much what. Yeah, I think white played the best move here. So there's two ways to deal with it. If we take here with the queen, well, that's exactly what I had mentioned about luring the queen away. Black then plays queen takes bishop, and it's check. And well, threatening the f pawn. The only way to hold on to that is knight to e2. Then black develops again with tempo. That's with check. Yeah, that's not good for white. So white actually chose the best move in this game. King to d2. Excellent move, given the circumstances. So basically, white is saying, hey, you're going to take my bishop? I want to take back, and I'm not going to give you my f-pawn, and I'm not going to give you this check with your bishop on b4. And so that's exactly what happened. Black correctly trades the queens because black is up a piece for a pawn. So if we count the number of pawns, black has 5 pawns, and white has 2, 4, and 6. So white has 1 pawn, but if we count the minor pieces, which are the knights and bishops, we see that black has an extra minor piece. So if we were looking at this position, we would say that black is up a bishop for a pawn, meaning black has the extra bishop, white has an extra pawn. All right, so black bishop to c5 check, developing with tempo. Good move. So now white has to address the check. King e4. I don't know if I would have gone to king e4 because, I mean, it's tough with the 2 bishops on the board that black has. It just makes us susceptible to this bishop to b7 and then losing the pawn on g2. If, yeah, it's tough here because either way, yeah, if you go to any of these light squares, you're going to get checked by the bishop, either on b7 or a6. If you go king d2, bishop to b7 hits the pawn, and it's really awkward. Hey, Snanzy, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Hope it's not too late for you. I'll post this up on my YouTube channel too, so, but given that you're here, you won't have to view the YouTube video. So yeah, I think the best move in this position would be king f3. You're not going to avoid the check, but the reason why I'm suggesting king f3 is so that you can then play king g3, and the king is holding on to the pawn, which means that you don't have to use your rooks or your knight to defend that pawn. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for subscribing to the YouTube. Okay, so king e4 I don't think is best. And black correctly plays bishop b7. White is going up the board with the king. Black castles. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong. Nothing wrong with castling, of course, but I don't see anything wrong with taking another pawn here because white can't attack the bishop due to the dark squared bishop being on the g1 square. Snanzy in the chat says, what about knight d5 after king e4? After the check. Oh, right here you mean, yeah. So you could try knight to d5. Normally you don't like to self-pin, so your knight is now pinned to the king, which means that it can't move legally. So you'd have to spend another move to defend the knight, and then move the king, and then finally you'd be able to move the knight. Unfortunately, in this position, I think black has a move that wins the knight outright. So can black play a move that deflects the king away from the protection of that knight? So let's say if black could get the king to go to any of those 3 squares, he could then follow it up with bishop takes knight. So what might black play in this position? Rook a4, exactly. So rook a4, if the king moves, then bishop takes knight. And Also note that b4 looks like it blocks the, well, it does block the check. Unfortunately, we can still take it because knight cannot take the rook because you'd be in check. So yeah, a general rule of thumb is you don't want to self-pin. So knight d5, I wouldn't recommend even consider it as a move. Okay, so king f5, black castles, king to g4. Yeah, I think you want to get your rooks involved. I would have left the king on f5 there. Although you probably were going to get moved, but let black move your king around. a4, okay, gets the pawn rolling. Try to give black something to worry about. You know, maybe you can get these pawns rolling up the board. That's a good idea. F takes e, yeah, f takes. And finally, black takes on g2. Rook h to e1. Yeah, that's logical. You're getting your rook involved, putting it behind the pawn. Makes sense. Now, bishop to f3. Now, you got to be careful here. You did play king g3, and you got to always be mindful of when your pieces are near each other. So I would be looking at this position and saying, ooh, bishop f2 is kind of in the air. It's in the air. Right now he can't play it because, of course, the king takes. But, of course, what happens is black moves the bishop, and now black is threatening bishop f2. So maybe to prevent that altogether, king h3 was a little better. Then you don't have to worry about that stuff. Whereas here, this is the game. So black brought the bishop back, and now he is threatening bishop to f2. So that threat needs to be addressed. Maybe the best move here would be knight e4. So knight e4 not only covers f2, it also blocks the bishop from protection of f3, so black wouldn't have rook f3 check as a move. And of course the knight is attacking the bishop, so black would have to make a decision here. But it's still tough because black with the two bishops are very powerful. So in this position, I think black could simply play bishop to d4 and pick up a pawn. Yeah, so maybe knight d4 or knight to e4 doesn't quite do it for us. It could simply be that we have to give up this a pawn, which is sad to say. Rook f1, and after black exchanges, black can win this pawn. Yeah, it's tough at this juncture. Black has done well to develop his pieces in active squares. Okay, well, let's see what happened in the game. So this white played king g3. Black played bishop c6. And white tried to push the pawn down the board, which makes sense. But unfortunately fell into this check. So black is now... Okay, so at this point, white pushed the pawn. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because if you take the bishop, you're down a full rook, and black could simply take this pawn. So it's understandable that white tried to push the pawn further. Bishop takes, and black did a nice job of converting this. Bishop b7 is a nice move. You can't take the bishop because you lose the rook. Well, why don't you post one of your recent games in our channel, um, and we can take a look. Yeah. Or did you just want me to pick one? I could look at your archive maybe. Okay. So white has to push, and black comes up, wins the pawn. And let's see how black finishes this up. How does he scoop up the A pawn? Very nice. That's a very nice way of doing it. And takes the pawn. And we're going to have a nice checkmate here at the end. Very nice checkmate. The bishop holds onto the pawn, and we can't take the rook. So, yeah, I think the black played a really nice game. The big takeaway in the opening right here is queen c4. And unfortunately, like I said, you got to be careful when you put your pieces near each other. And so black correctly saw that he could win a piece here. So well played by black, and white did a good job of giving black some things to worry about. In particular, this a pawn. Black always had to keep an eye on that. So very nicely done by white. So thank you, Snanzy, who's currently in the chat, for providing that game. And like I said earlier, if you have a game that you'd want to be analyzed, do join our Discord channel. Use the exclamation mark Discord to get the link, and you can post one of your games in our PGN channel.